Hey guys, here's the second video in my DeviationTX series. We already kind of covered the basics in the standard video, so I'm just going to kind of assume that maybe you've watched that, or you're of a level that you're just looking to see how to use the advanced menu setup configuration. So why don't we go ahead and fire up the simulator software, or the emulation software I should say. Now, in this case, I'm going to go ahead and actually just kind of show you how to get the advanced menu kind of up and running. I'm sure there'll be some follow-up videos as well, but I'm going to go ahead and actually load a configuration file that I did for my friend who uses RealFlight and was having a tough time getting his transmitter to communicate properly to that software. So I will share this INI file as well. This is really handy if you're using the, I think it's called the AnyLink, where you plug in your transmitter into the RealFlight transmitter, or I think there's a small little box you can use nowadays as well. But in any event, I'm going to go ahead and load this. Most of their settings are the same as before. I have it in as type heli, but I don't really have the swatch set to anything, so you could probably use this in plane mode as well. I've got it set up for all 10 channels, and I do have the mixer GUI set to the advanced. So that being said, so now what's different is when you go into the model menu, instead of having the simple standard menu that I think really emulates the others, virtually that entire video, the standard GUI video, gets replaced with item number 2, mixers here. As I go down, you'll see you still have timers, telemetry, trims, data log, main page. I guess the only thing different is the trims menu. This is a new menu. So what you're seeing new here, you can adjust the trim step. So this lets you actually choose how much the trim gets adjusted each time you press the trim button. So you can see it goes, the default is 0.1. That's price efficient. I don't really ever see myself changing this. I like to have small trim steps anyways, and this seems to work pretty well. So that being said, let's jump right into the mixer, because again, this one setting here does replace the entirety of the 20-minute video that I already posted previously. So we go into the mixer. So it's actually pretty straightforward. It looks kind of daunting because I think most people's experience is using a radio that is done, by Spectrum or Futaba or whatnot, and I think their screens are very similar to what the Deviation standard GUI looks like, and that's great. It lets you set up things really, really quickly, and I'm not saying this is any more powerful than any of the others, but I think it's probably as powerful, and I actually really enjoy the way this is set up. Once I had kind of like a basic understanding of how it was working, then everything else kind of fell into place on top of that. And again, our friend's going to be looking at the input display and then looking at what the channel display looks like on the outside. So it's pretty simple. One thing to keep in mind is, depending upon what type of radio you want, what type of receiver you're using, the channel order is going to come into play here. So if you're using a Spectrum bind and fly, maybe I'll try to post it in the show notes. I forget what at the top of my head, but the channel order is not going to be the same as what like the Devo standard is, where I believe that Spectrum has their throttle on channel 1 and the Devo standard kind of puts it on channel 3. So I just kind of left it the way it was out of the box for the Devo. Certainly something like RealFlight, you can go ahead and actually, once you have all the controls set up properly so that the radio is transmitting them, you actually can select, what you want what channel you're transmitting on to correlate to what channel that needs to be in the simulator. But the principles are the same. So if you need your throttle to be on channel 1, then just simply execute the the correct channel mapping. All right, so the mixers, how this is set up, you're going to be presented with an entry for all of the channels that you entered. So I chose to be a 10 channel setup, so I'm going to get 10 entries. I will then still have all my virtual channels as well, so I got another 10 virtual outputs. I'm not using those here, but they can be set up the same way. You just get to assign the the toggle switch. Usually it's something like a trim switch or something like that that allows you to get extra channels out of the radio, which is pretty cool. So again, this mixer setup replaces the entirety of the standard GUI video that I did. So somewhere within this you'll pretty much find everything from that video. So first things first, if you highlight the channel you're at, go ahead and select that. This is where you're going to do your reverse, whether it's normal or reversed. You'll set your failsafe value, whether it's off, or set it to what it needs to be. You hit enter actually to toggle that. Likewise for the reverse, you hit enter and that goes back and forth. Your safety, what this is do you want the transmitter to warn you if something's on? I think the default might be on the throttle only. So if it's showing you a non-zero value because you set that safety, you pick which channel to check, and then you input what the value is. Here's your minimum limit, maximum limit. This is kind of like your endpoint or your travel that you had a dedicated menu for before. The difference is the old system, the standard system, has categories, and then you go into the category and you adjust everything in that category. So for example, you do all your channel throws all in one place. This is a little different where you do everything uniquely to the channel that you're editing. So I think it's actually, in the long run, it's more intuitive to do it this way, because you go down and anything that has to happen on channel 1, I'm going to adjust all in this set of screens. Sub trims, everything is done right here. So once you kind of set that once, it's probably going to be left alone, but you may need to tweak that again. But really, what I think the main focus of is you go over the next setup where you're going to add something to this mix. So I think my standard setup, I just add Expo and dual rate. So I'd go ahead and hit enter, and that brings you to this screen. You can toggle left and right and pick the rest of these pieces. Since I did enable it in heli mode, I have cyclic that I can adjust. I probably could have put it to plain and would have worked just fine. You just wouldn't have those cyclic options in this channel, but honestly, you can leave them, as I've done, you can leave them unadjusted and it will work just fine. So again, this is kind of like if you will, like the simple advanced mode. Like any super crazy mixes where they output to other channels and remix into themselves, that'll be covered in another video. But I think this advanced tutorial will get really the majority of what most people, I think, were looking to do from a just kind of getting you up to speed, apples to apples, with some of the other brand radios. Alright, so let's go ahead and look at adding some Expo and dual rate. You can see in the scenario that I've got my rudder dual rate 1 toggle is really going to enable all 3 of my channels that I've got dual rate and Expo set on. And you can see all that right from this mixer kind of overview screen, which is cool. But if you want to adjust it, simply go in, highlight the Expo and dual rate, hit enter. You can see here it's already been set up for Expo and dual rate. Another option could have been simple, which is what I use for my throttle and a few other things. You can get into really complex mixes, and you're cyclic for all your heli guys, but I'm just going to leave it at Expo and dual rate. Once again, you want to confirm that you select the proper source. These are your stick commands. So in this case, I've selected the Elevon sticks are going to power my channel 1. Now you got your high rate. That's going to be your your default standard. Then you've got your switch 1, and then you have your switch 2. Now, if you're only using a single position switch like I'm doing, you do need to adjust switch 1 only. If you go down to switch 2, it'll kind of ignore everything. So only use switch 2 if you're using a 3-position switch. And then it's, you're just basically adjusting that second position like we're going to show you for the first one. So into switch 1, I'm going to go ahead and choose the switch I'd like to use. Again, all of your switches are available, any mix individually. If you did want to use the flight modes, you would say, okay, flight mode position 1 does this, and then the next switch you'd scroll down and you make flight mode position 2 control the next one. But in my case, I like to keep it all pretty simple for me. I like to do the left shoulder toggle, which is the rudder dual rate. So you basically select your switch. You want to, if you hit enter when you're on this mid-rate piece, and again, this is reminding you this is the middle switch position. If you hit enter, it can say linked, in which case it's going to link it with what you got above. I actually like to leave it on Expo, or I actually intentionally chose Expo. And then, so again, toggling this will change what's below. Then once you add Expo, you want to, you have a couple of options you can switch it to if you want to do curves and things, but we're just really dealing with the Expo. So go ahead and hit enter. And you come down here, symmetric will put the same curve on both positive and negative, which is really like, what happens on either side of mid-stick. You can do an individual one for positive and an individual one for negative. I leave it for symmetrical. And I'm going to go ahead and choose my Expo value that I like to start out with, which is 30. Go ahead and save it. And then I also want to limit my my scale or my travel. So I've got my Expo set to 30. I go down to my scale and I just use the left and right arrow. I used to bring it down to 80. That's my sweet spot that I like to set my dual rate and Expo travels to. So then go ahead and just click save. And I did the same thing for the aileron channel, and I did the same thing for the rudder. Throttle, I did something a little differently. I chose the simple one. And again, I just pretty much used the simple so I could select a source, in which case was just simply throttle. Leave it on the 1-to-1 curve. It just gives it a nice linear curve. You could, if you wanted to, you can, there's lots of different type curves you can put in here. You can do a 3-point, you can do a 7-point, and that's kind of more like what you're used to for like helis. But in this particular case, just leave it at the 1-to-1. That gives it a nice linear. I'm going to give it 100%, so that's full throw here to what it was set up on the previous screen. This is going to give you 100% of that. So pretty simple. I really just come down, select a channel, and then I'm good to go on this. So I'm going to X out of this. Channel 4 rudder, I also have the dual rate as before. Alright, so let's come down to show you how I set up the flight mode channel, which is channel 5. So you can see on this screen that channel 5 receives input from flight mode 0 as well as flight mode 1 and flight mode 1 and flight mode 2. So I set that up by selecting the Expo and dual rate scenario for this particular mix. Now, for some reason, when you first come to the screen, it shows this as none. It's kind of strange. If you go down and come back up, it's going to show you that it is actually the flight mode. Just a kind of a glitch, I guess. I don't really know why it does that. But I'm going to go ahead and actually just pick flight mode 0, and this is again reminding you this is your high rate. In the previous Expo settings, we were using the 1-to-1, which is a nice linear curve. But to make the flight mode 3-position switch kind of work the way I like it to, I use fixed. And under my travel scale, I've got this 100%. You see how this is using the chart? So for me, this is saying, alright, when I'm in flight mode 0, I'm at 100. And then when I go down to flight mode and I select it with my switch, flight mode 1, I'm picking a scale of 0. So that's basically saying, alright, this is middle of the road, this is 0. And then when I go down to flight mode when I go down to the switch 2, I choose flight mode position 2. It reminds me it's low rate, and I come down, I set it to -100. So for me, this is basically saying like all the way down is this position, in the middle it's 0, and all the way up top it's the default 100% setup for that. So that's how that one is set. Alright, so the gear channel, I just pretty much needed to apply the source for channel 6. So in this case, I went down here and I left it on simple mode, and all I adjusted actually was I just went ahead and selected the gear. Gear 0 is being my input here. I've got 0 Expo, I've got 100% scale, and a 0 offset. That does the trick for my, my gear channel. Then I go down and you see channel 7 is auxiliary 4 and channel 8 is auxiliary 5. Same difference as before. I'm just using the simple designation for this, and I'm doing that just simply because I want to apply the output of auxiliary 4 to channel 7. I don't change anything else down here. Likewise with channel 8. So really all we're doing again is just using the simple to give it an assignment. Then once we get down to channel 9, that is for my mix. And again, I wanted to have a 3 position on the mix, so I set it up just like the flight mode, where you go in, and I've got the upper one is at 100% fixed, the middle one is using mix 1 at 0, and the bottom position is switch 2, and I use mix 2 as my source for that. And again, that's -100, just like the throttle channel. And you can see channel 10, I actually don't have anything assigned to it, but I could go ahead and pick any of the other available controls to go ahead and apply to that. Now, we can kind of take a look and see what is happening with the outputs. So as you see, I'm going to go ahead and max out my channels here, and just as before, when I hit the dual rate for rudder, it is going to take my channel 1, 2, and 4, and again, throttle is channel 3, so it's not affected by the dual rate, and it's going to bring that down to 80%. So I can see that, at least from this perspective, from the throttle side, or from the travel side of things, I can see that my dual rates are set up correctly in the mixer, because when I do toggle them, it actually brings them down to the 80% value that I just set. My gear channel, I can tell that's working properly because as I select it, which you can tell that I'm selecting because the 100% moves. That's basically like 100 is like the checkbox, if you will. You can see that my output on channel 6 goes from 100 to -100, and that really again gives you like the full spectrum of either side of the curve there, and it allows you to get triggers. You would actually be able to set the gear values to what you needed them to be for, but again, I set this up specifically for rail flight, and you just wanted to have full kind of on or off for that, so you could use it in the simulator. And then the other thing that we have that we can take a look at is the mix, and you can see, you might recall we set that up to be -100, 0, and 100 is my 3 toggle states. So you can see up top here when I'm at mix 0, that means like the top switching, if you will, that's at 100%. When I go down to middle position, that's going to be a 0%, and then when I go down to the bottom or mix 2 position, that's going to give me the -100. So again, you can set those how you like them. I set them up to be all the way to the bottom, middle, all the way to the top. There's that, and the flight mode works exactly the same way as well. It's going to toggle 0, -100, and 100 accordingly. And then the last thing to kind of check is the where are they? My auxiliary 4. You see that's 100%, and that maps down here to 7. Channel 7 is my output there. And auxiliary 5, that is going to be what I'm showcasing on channel 8. So those are my two control knobs, which you can see are actually being output. So the important thing is, with the mixer properly set, you can actually confirm that the values that you expected are actually being received by the actual transmitters transmitting those. So this is why I prefer to use the emulator software than the actual transmitter itself, because you can do it, but you do have to toggle back and forth between what you're trying to adjust and then the channel monitor, and then you need to kind of move your throttle stick or whatever, and then you would see that okay, that is in fact happening. And then I could toggle my dual rate, and then I would notice that my controls tap out at 80%. Toggle the dual rate off, and the same stick value would give me 100. But you can, either which way. But I do prefer to use the emulator software to set that up. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Again, it's not that tricky. Everything gets put into this mixer screen, and we just kind of give you a run through of how I set up my template. So this is what I got. I utilize this particular screen for all my models, and then I just kind of tweak the values accordingly. So let's say I was in a scenario where I needed a different value to be thrown in my mix. Like if I'm using an APM controller, you can hook it up and try to get the different, you've got up to 6 positions, but they need very specific values on what they'll trigger. So I would go ahead and actually just tweak that, those values on this screen while I had it plugged into the mission planner or whatnot, and make sure that I'm hitting the appropriate values to trigger that different command on the flight controller. That might be worth doing a whole video unto itself on how to use Deviation for that, but hopefully this gets you guys up and running with the advanced mixer menu in kind of like what I consider like a basic advanced. Like you can get like the full setup of your models here, I think, with this kind of understanding, and then from there you can kind of experiment even further. But I think using the simple the dual rate Expo that we looked at, and then when you're using things like the mix channels, where you're going to use dual rate Expo, but you actually are going to make it be a fixed value at each of the trigger points versus having an actual curve. Because keep in mind, when you're doing the something like a stick, you can have a nice linear curve because the analog control actually moves the position in the output along that path. So when you're at mid stick, that's going to be 0. When you're at stick all the way down, that's negative 100. When you're at stick all the way up, that's 100. But when you're using a toggle switch, you don't get that. So I like to use the fixed one to manually set 100 to be at the top, 0 to be in the middle, and negative 100 to be at the bottom. Hopefully that makes sense. It makes sense to me. Certainly the way that I'm looking to use it anyways. So if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. Hopefully the video was helpful. Thanks for watching.